afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Samuel Huylebroeck. I'm a support engineer at iText Software. Most of you will probably have heard of iText. It's a PDF creation and manipulation library written in both Java and .NET. It's available in open source under the HTML and it's developed and maintained by my employee. So, today's talk will be about HTML, responsive web design, and how it can translate to PDF. We'll start with a quick introduction to HTML and CSS. This will probably be old news for most of you, but it's good to have a quick refresher. Then we'll go a bit in depth about with responsive web design, talk about some of the things that live there. We'll move on into next generation PDF, the important concepts. I will be reiterating some of the things that have been said before today. Then we'll move on to next generation PDF, talking a bit about creation. We'll be focusing on how to create a next generation PDF, starting with the HTML and accompanying CSS as the basis. And we'll round up the presentation with a short summary of everything I will tell. So, HTML and CSS, these are by now quite old technologies. We'll start with HTML. HTML, or hypertext markup language, is a way of is a file format and a way of structuring your content, a way of grouping your content. This is done through the use of HTML tags that surround content, and they provide structural information. Most browsers use these HTML tags to interpret the content that's enclosed within and then provide outputs. The accompanying technology, CSS, or cascading style sheets, are used to provide presentation information like layout, like fonts, like colors to the content. They use a system of style inheritance and classes to allow you to reuse styles and style elements. HTML and CSS together allow you to separate content from presentation, so you can have different views for the same content. You can see a short example of some CSS classes to the right. Good. This was a very quick refresher. Let's move on to responsive web design. Now, HTML has fixed content, but its representation depends on the accompanying cascading style sheets. And responsive design is the idea of taking full advantage of this, of the way you can have one set of content and then use CSS to generate a whole slew of views for it. You can see it in the example image on a desktop. We have a nice title bar and then two sidebars to surround the main content. But of course, on a tablet or a mobile phone, this won't translate too well. So instead, you move some of the content that was a sidebar to the bottom, or even both. So the main concept of responsive design is that the visualization of your content is fluid, and you should adapt your representation to the capabilities of the viewer itself. So you might ask, why should you practice responsive design? Well, over the years, we've grown from simply having desktop and big meaty screens and computers to having a diverse landscape of different devices, each with their own resolutions and their own capabilities. The rise of smartphones, tablets, the use of laptops, notebooks, print media, I could go on for a while. So each of these devices, they have varying capabilities. Most commonly, we're talking about different screen sizes here, but also the dynamic orientation. Your smartphone, it can flip from portrait mode to landscape mode, all by just flipping the device itself. But it's not even devices that have different capabilities. Sometimes the users themselves don't always have the same baseline. I am thinking about various forms of color blindness here, of nearsightedness. So this is all these reasons give rise to why you should use responsive web design to adapt the representation, the visualization of your content to both the capabilities of your device as well as your user. Now, how should you do it? Well, I've been talking about how your representation should adapt to the capabilities of the device. For it to be able to do that, it should need to be able to query the device and get an idea about its capabilities. What's the screen width? What extra features can it support? And based on these media queries, you can select the best representation. Now, how do you define a best or better representation? You can make use of specialized CSS. CSS specifically written to render your HTML content well on a mobile device. And through the use of CSS queries, you can also, in the same CSS file, add specifications for how it should look on a desktop, on a large screen, how it should look in print media. A couple of examples would be to change the font, widths, sizes of images, the positions based on the query results, like we have this dynamic reflow of content here. For example, mobile screens would, of course, be using larger font sizes, so the text remains readable on a smaller screen, while on larger desktops you can scale down and fit more into the screen itself. And of course, in print media, you can hide interactive contents, animated features, audio stuff. So this was a very short overview of responsive web design. Now we'll see how this fits in with the idea of next generation PDF. I'm sure a lot of you already have some ideas about that. But we'll start with a couple of the challenges a classic PDF, the PDF as we know it right now, face. A classic PDF, it has a static layout. Each page has a page size. The PDF instructions themselves are commonly drawing instructions. You put this letter there, you draw a line from there to there. And they don't respond well to device capabilities. We have a PDF page format A4 and a couple of devices here. And if we try to jam this PDF into each of them, it will look good on some of them. It will look a bit worse on others. And in the case of mobile phones, you probably will have scroll bars appearing. So that's challenge number one, the fact that a classic PDF has a static layout, that it does not react to the device you're viewing it on. The other challenge is the fact that in a classic PDF, content is not necessarily guaranteed to be structured. Most of you will probably know a bit about PDF syntax, but these are just text instructions for printing a couple of lines of text on a file. But each of these instructions have coordinates where they should be placed, but when they don't really, the moment they're written like this, they lose all structure. So maybe this was part of a header. I don't know. It's just a text instruction right now. So that's the second big challenge, the lack of structures in PDF. So then we have next generation PDF. It's built on the PDF 2.0 specification, and it aims to address these classic weaknesses, the static layout, the lack of structure. And for that, we can look to responsive web design for inspiration. The idea of using media queries and specialized CSS to have multiple ways of representing the same base content, to select the best view based on the viewer capabilities. How could we do this in next generation PDF? Well, one idea is to have alternate views in your PDF or using your PDF or derived from your base PDF. So base PDF is the classic PDF as we all know it. Then having PDF alternates, possible alternate representations of your PDF content that are tailored to a certain device or a certain screen width or a certain user, as well as the possibility of an HTML alternate for in case you want to view it on a web browser. Now, to address the lack of structure, we already have something in place. It's tagged PDF, based on PDF from PDF 1.4 onwards. It adds logical structure to a PDF. We've had some talks about this before. It also included a basic layout model and a set of standard structures and attributes, as well as the possibility of defining your own using role maps and custom roles. Well, tagging, while taking inspiration from HTML, it's not an exact match. It's not a one-to-one correspondence. And the original uses for tagged PDF to use it in conjunction with text extraction and graphics extraction and to automatic reflow, there's still valid use cases today, which this is why it's interesting to have tag PDF as a requirement for next generation PDF to address this lack of structure. And of course, from the tag structure of the PDF itself, we can get our derived HTML produced from the tag PDF using the HTML derivation algorithm. We've had one talk about this before in this track. Of course, you can derive your CSS from the local styles. Now, we've talked a bit about what next generation PDF is, where we could look towards for inspiration, but we've not really talked about how we should create a next generation PDF, how a next generation PDF producer could look like. So I want to harken back to my earlier topic of responsive web design and make a case for producing a next generation PDF starting from HTML and CSS. This has a couple of advantages, namely the HTML itself. The structure is already there. There's no need to create structure post-fact. And the second is that for creating alternate views, responsive web design already faced this problem. They already found some solutions to it. The use of CSS and media queries to create alternate views. Of course, creating PDF from HTML has its own set of challenges. Not everything in the HTML context makes sense in the PDF context. Animations, certain audio, certain interactive features, they don't have a direct relative in the PDF syntax. And the question is then, how should we handle it? Should we omit them? Should we try to find an analog for them? Another big challenge is pagination. HTML is a collection of floating block elements. It doesn't have inherently the concept of a page. PDF, in contrast, is very much a paged media. And then the question is, where in your HTML do you draw the page lines? Where do you make the cut for content? These are all challenges a next generation HTML to PDF converter faces. Of course, floating elements, mapping them to static coordinates in the PDF space, that's another one of very big challenges. Now, of course, a next generation PDF producer will need the capability to produce possibly produce multiple PDF alternates to tailor them to the needs of the devices or the needs of the users. And once again here, we can look to HTML and CSS and responsive web design for inspiration and use tailored CSS in conjunction with our HTML as the input for the PDF producer. Along with media query support to make it easier so you don't need a different CSS file for every output profile. These could be the makings of a good next generation PDF producer. Now, there already are several HTML to PDF producers. Things like iText, PDF, HTML, and XML worker, Acrobat, PDF chip, just whatever you use to print from your browser. But they're not really ready yet for next generation PDF, simply because we're still talking about it right now. So, but some are a bit more ready than others, and I'd like to use PDF HTML as an example of creating both a base PDF as well as alternate PDFs from the input HTML together with tailored CSS. So, and then later this could be a possible next generation PDF producer. So for next generation PDF, we certainly need base content and the PDF needs to be tagged. We'd also like some alternate views that have the same content as the base PDF, but a different visualization, a different representation. PDF HTML, it's an iText 7, it's built on iText 7 and it allows you to take HTML5 and CSS and transform it to PDF. And most importantly for us today is that it has support for media queries and CSS handling based on media queries. So, well, if the mouse wants to work. Oh, come on. This worked 5 seconds before. Ah, there we go. I got it. It's just.
You got it?
Yeah, here it is.
Okay.
So we have a dummy document. It's based on the responsive web design tutorial. And this is the HTML file. And as you'll be able to see as soon as I can make this shrink, it's using a responsive CSS and media queries to adapt how it looks based on the screen width. So for example, if I make it bigger again, you've probably see that this floats to the right, but in addition to that, the font will grow larger, and if I make it even smaller, it's going to be. This is a bit exaggerated for effect, with a very large font size. And if it wants to scroll, okay. So this is our HTML. Yep, twice apparently. Then using PDF HTML, we've created. Should be, there we go. This, for example, would be the output for mobile devices. You'll notice that the font size is pretty big, that everything flows from top to bottom. Of course, using the same HTML. Mouse, where are you? Here you are. This is for desktops. Here you can see the sidebars, as well as smaller font size, and the page is a lot wider. Well, of course, tablets as well. You're not open. As you can see, we have a pretty good match to how the HTML and CSS handles the file. So from a single HTML and CSS file, we've created a base PDF and 2 additional alternate views. And of course, they should all be tagged. Tagging structure. I'm not usually a Mac user, so. It's not low tree. It's not layers.
Trying to get the tag tree,
Yes.
right click on the left hand panel and choose tags. It's not, it doesn't show up by default. As you can remember.
Yeah, but it's not showing up.
Yeah, if it's reader, you're not.
Ah, that's a shame. You'll have to take my word for it then. So yeah. So let's go to the summary. We've started this presentation with a brief reintroduction to HTML and CSS. Then we talked about how in the world of web design, they have responsive web design, in which they use specialized CSS and media queries to adapt the representation of the HTML content to the capabilities of the viewing device. Then we've talked a bit about the challenges classic PDF faces, especially in these kind of contexts. The fact that the layout is static, that it doesn't transform according to the capabilities of the viewer and of the user, that there isn't necessarily structural information in the PDF. Could be there, but it's not guaranteed to be there. Then we went over some concepts of next generation PDF, how next generation PDF aims to be a bit more responsive, to create a dynamic layout by using PDF alternates, and to also provide capabilities of selecting the best view based on viewer capabilities, and how you can use tagged PDF to introduce structure information, as well as the HTML alternate and derived HTML. And then we ended with a short demonstration of how a next generation PDF could possibly be created using HTML and CSS as the basis by using a tool that supports media queries. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes?
So I wonder how you do the layout. So CSS is evolving very quickly, and we have the box model, now we have the flex model. Are you either, I don't know, rendering the HTML in the background on the right size and then measuring the elements, or are you re-implementing all the layout rules?
I don't know the specifics of it, but the iText 7 as a PDF creation library, its internal layout model has a good amount of similarities with how browsers do their layouting. And PDF HTML builds on this layouting engine by taking the HTML and transforming everything into iText layout objects, and then using the iText layout engine to make everything work. But it's quite a complicated algorithm. It still has some kinks to work out. So.
You can think of it as sort of the opposite side of the next generation PDF that we've been talking about.
It's a difficult task. And you also have to track the speed, the development, right? I mean, you have to do all the versions to keep track of all this stuff. It's a lot of versions.
Yes.
Any more questions?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So do you expect to be completely automatic, or do you, I don't know, expect some user interaction in providing proper tagged PDF as output?
We for iText we expect it to be fully automatic, as in because iText is not an end-user product, it's a software library. We provide all the tools you need to make it happen automatically. Like I wasn't able to show it right now, but all the entire tagging structure was done by simply in my code setting the PDF file to be tagged. So it was all done automatically. Whenever I inserted a header element in the HTML, the PDF HTML would transform it into a iText paragraph. No, it's like div span paragraph, each tagged with the font size information, with the font to use and such.
So, sorry if I ask again. So that means you are basically implementing a PDF render of HTML and CSS.
No, not really. What?
Yes.
I mean, you have to implement HTML, CSS, and everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah, but not. Yeah, probably yeah. Yes.
Now you have three different PDFs.
I suppose the viewing should work like you only have one PDF, and if you're trying to view it with your mobile phone,
Mhm.
it
Well,
will give
yeah.
you
The,
that
ye-
version of it. If you try to use desktop, it will give you that version. No,
Okay,
am I
so that's
right?
that's actually a task for a next generation PDF viewer. The next generation PDF viewer would need to be able to detect that the PDF is a next generation PDF and has possible alternate views, and the viewer then would do the necessary queries for okay how what's the width of my screen, can I use certain color spaces or not, and this was more a demo of how you can create multiple views, each with a different intent, and then they can then be fused together to form a next generation PDF. And the next generation PDF viewer can then detect, well, okay, I'm being used on a mobile device. This next generation PDF as an alternate view for mobile devices. I'll load up and render this one instead of the base one.
Okay, that sounds good. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, just, I will clarify, what Samuel showed and just described with the idea of alternates and selection is an idea we've been exploring within the next generation PDF working group. We're not sure that it's one that's going to, we're not sure where it's going to fall out. There are some concerns that have been raised about that particular model, but it does have a lot of benefit, as you've seen. There's a great example of how one could use it. So it's one of those areas we're still a little fuzzier on than others in terms of the final delivery model. But it's something we actually like. We think it has some very interesting approaches, especially tying it into, and you sort of hinted at it, media queries, where we leverage a common model of device discovery. So that's why we really haven't talked about it much previously. We're not sure where it falls out, but it is an absolutely part of what stuff we've been working on.
Okay, any more questions? I'll answer that gentleman over there first.
Just to confirm, if I understood correctly, you have these alternate views. Each alternate view can be based either on the standard PDF model, the PostScript instructions, or the HTML model, which is responsive. Is that correct? So you could have more than one PDF type of page, if it's like a landscape page or a portrait.
Yes.
Or is there only one? So this
No.
So
Yeah.
in the alternate model, you can have either a PDF alternate or an HTML alternate.
any number of items.
And in the current model, any number of items.
Okay, thank you.
Which again, is architecturally really interesting and from a user perspective, really confusing.
Yeah.
Which is admittedly why we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet.
Yes.
Just an extension of the question. The media query is not part of PDF, but it would be part of the viewer, right? Or is it
Yes.
already part of the language of PDF? No.
It's not part of PDF. In the browsers and media queries in web design, they're part of CSS, and browsers know how to handle them. But they're not part of CSS syntax. In the example I used, I had a piece of code I had to specify to my converter properties. I had to set, okay, my screen is going to be this wide, and it's going to be on the type of screen. And then I inserted HTML and CSS, and then the PDF came out.
In this alternate model, we've incorporated CSS media queries into the PDF syntax. Again, so if we decide to go down this path, it's an addition we would need to the PDF language.
So, one more time, any more questions? Okay.